Hi, everyone. My name is Scott Gurian. I am the host of this series we've just started here from Radio Free Montclair and Montclair Design Week, where each day we will be taking questions from the community, questions people have always wondered about the place they live. And we're going to be bringing on different experts, guests, people who are just knowledgeable about different things to help answer those questions. And each day I will be joined by a different co-host. And my co-host today is Krystal Persaud. Krystal, would you welcome, and would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. My name is Krystal. I'm a designer and entrepreneur. I was born in Bergen County and I have taught at the New Jersey Institute of Technology for many years. So I'm excited to see what questions people have for us.
And I should, I guess, give a little bit more of a background about myself. When I'm not doing this with Montclair Design Week, I'm a journalist and host of a podcast called Far From Home, where during normal non-COVID times, I travel all around the world and tell stories from my travels from far-flung places like Iran and Mongolia and Chernobyl. But of course, none of us are traveling right now. And so I got to thinking that, you don't necessarily need to go to the other side of the world to find interesting stories. There's a lot of interesting stories right in our own backyards. And that's part of what this series is about, just finding answers to questions that a lot of us, even if we've lived in a place our entire lives, might have wondered about, like what's in that vacant building, or how does that thing in the town work, or whatever it is. So that's kind of our goal. So what we've done is we put out the call a few weeks ago for people from the community to submit questions of things they've wondered about. And each day, as I said, we'll be focusing on different topics. And today, our first question comes from Andrea, who is a resident of Montclair, and we'll have a guest to help answer her question. So, welcome, Andrea. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Andrea.
Hi, how are you? So I heard that Montclair used to have a trolley system, an actually pretty robust one that went all the way up Bloomfield Avenue. And I've seen old stock photos of it. I want to know, where did the tracks go? Are they still buried underneath Bloomfield Avenue, or are they in fact ripped up?
And what is it about that interests you? Have you lived in Montclair a long time? Or?
Well, I have. I've lived in Montclair on and off since like 1990. And I have to say, I feel like public transportation in New Jersey is not the best. And I would personally love to take that trolley up and down Bloomfield Avenue, because it would just be helpful if I wanted to pick up a couple quick things at Whole Foods and then not have to like lug it back. I feel like in general, I would probably end up also taking the trolley, which I think had originated. I'm not sure if it came in and out of Lackawanna Plaza or if it went all the way down to Newark at some point, where you had to transfer at Lackawanna, then go to Newark. I would love to be able to ride into Newark and be able to do that without having to put more car traffic out. I feel like it's an environmental issue, it's a sustainability issue, it's an access issue. I'm personally very excited about the idea of learning more about the trolley. I mean, I know the auto industry basically killed trolleys all over the United States. So I guess I'm really just interested in knowing the homegrown story of, where are the trolley tracks? Could we maybe at one point unbury them and resurrect the trolley from years past? Who knows?
And of course, there are city buses, but buses aren't always reliable, and riding the bus, to be honest, isn't always the most positive experience.
Trolleys
So
seem so romantic.
they do,
Like,
right? Yeah.
think about riding a trolley. Yeah.
If you've ever been
It
to New
reminds me also
Orleans
of
or
living
San
in San
Francisco,
Francisco.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I was going to say.
Yep. Yeah. So there's a simple answer and then a more complicated answer. So for the simple answer, I reached out to the town of Montclair, reached out to the engineering department, got an email back from a guy, his name is Norberto Hernandez. He's, I guess, the engineer for the town of Montclair. And he himself has only been working with Montclair for a short time. So he had to do some research himself and ask other people with more institutional memory who've been around for a while. He said that he wrote back to me. He said that he found out that there are indeed remnants of the old trolley tracks and the cobblestone roadway, beneath the pavement in parts of Bloomfield Avenue. But the tracks are no longer continuous the whole way. That a lot of them have been ripped up over the years or removed during construction activities. Occasionally, when they're doing some work in the roadway, they'll find like a 5-foot section in some parts. They're spread out in different areas, but the whole track, unfortunately, is no longer there. But that got me to thinking kind of the larger question about the trolley. Whatever happened to the trolley? When did it disappear? What is the whole history around that? So for that, we're actually, and you can actually see a picture behind me of what it looked like on Bloomfield Avenue, an old historical photo. Wow. For more on the whole history, we're joined by Davey Joseph, who is a transit equity advocate. Thank you so much for joining us, Davey.
Hey, Davey.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
So tell us a little bit about the history with trains and trolleys in Montclair. I mean, if we go way back, I know there was some history with decamp bus lines. It was originally a stagecoach that would go into New York, I believe. But then trains and trolleys came along. And when did all that start?
Well, so from the stagecoach era into the trolley era, that was probably around the latter part of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century was when you started to see massive efforts towards electrification of horse-drawn trolley systems. So the tracks were laid, but they were pulled by horses initially, and they were everywhere. And pretty much as a general rule across this country and North America, pretty much anywhere in the world, the same pattern. Latter part of the 1800s, and then you had Edison working, very closely with the development of electric power and its institutionalization in electric lights, but also he was very interested in traction, and if you can sort of think about this, because it is the case that anything that is a bus today, pretty much anywhere in America, came out of a trolley line initially. And one way you can think about it, because I really didn't know exactly how to answer the question, Andrea, about how much of it exists beneath the surface of the roadway. But essentially, when you look at old postcards and old photos of record, you understand that roads were initially thoroughfares. They were designed for the smooth flow of people as rapidly as possible. And the paradigm that we inherited post-auto industry was that, cars were parked along. We pretty much subsidized parking on our thoroughfares, and our thoroughfares no longer serve the initial purpose. And we're trying to get back to that. It's causing problems for transit systems, but basically, it's almost like dueling vascular systems through history. Anyone that looks at transit will look at the road and will look at and see something it's almost like walking around seeing ghosts everywhere, because you also look at the built environment around you and you realize that wherever there were row houses or triple deckers in any of these cities in the Northeast, industrialized cities across the country, really, there's a certain style. I live in Clifton, neighboring Clifton, and I can walk through my neighborhood and you can see these disjointed kind of styles of architecture. And then you can almost see where the Depression occurred and where there were probably ambitious plans to continue rows all the way from Passaic through Clifton to Nutley. And you can look at the height of the buildings and the style of buildings. And that wherever that was done, there was a trolley line that you could walk to, because they worked in concert together. The builders worked together with the trolley line entrepreneurs. They were all private initially. And
Davey, quick question for you. So we went from horses to electrified horse buggies to trolleys to buses, right? Is that what you're saying?
Not electrified horse buggies, no. It went from horse and carriage, right, to fixed guideway, tracks in the street.
Got it.
Where the carriage was put on railway wheels, train wheels. And then it was hauled by horses.
Got it. Okay.
Then came the era of electrification. And Edison and others around the world, it's interesting about these big jumps in innovation. They're happening in other parts of the world as well. I'm not the best person to ask about who those people were around the world, but certainly people were communicating with one another. It took a lot longer, obviously, but they were reading each other's, scientific journals, reports, things like that. And they were in touch with one another by correspondence, written correspondence. So I'm sure that they shared information. But you can see, interestingly enough, our country was pretty much at the forefront of all of this. And even the systems in London were largely because of American entrepreneurs that went over to the UK and introduced
Wow.
what they had done here. And of course, people became guinea pigs. There were accidents where, people were crossing and they didn't really know about, would it be okay to have the rails raised on the road? Would people respect raised rails? And of course, nobody respects raised. I mean, you're walking across the street, or you'll trip, everyone will trip. So it really was a learning as they went. And then, they developed the flange and the typical, if you go to any, well, first of all, we have to understand that we still have trolley systems in New Jersey. They're the light rail systems. The Newark light rail system is the last remaining remnant of the original public service trolley system. And that included about 1,000 miles of electric street railways and interurban railways in the state of New Jersey alone.
And what actually is the distinction between the old trolleys and the modern day light rails?
It's mostly the equipment that runs on it. Today, it's become well. It's also a combination of off-street running and on-street running. A trolley, as we classically think of it, runs in the middle of the street, but it also has run in what we call private right of way, meaning the right of way is over a reservation, like a railway line, just the same as a railway line.
Got it.
So at the beginning of the last century, when my grandparents immigrated to this country, they came into a paradigm where you had the railway network, which is basically what we see in the way of Amtrak, New Jersey Transit, MTA, Long Island Railroad, Metro North, SEPTA, commuter rail services. All of the region's rail was there. And then complementing that, really any station you alighted from, you would board a trolley. So you had an electric vehicle on rails on fixed guideway that would take you very smoothly to your destination.
Kind of for shorter distances after you got off the train that took you long distances.
There were a full range of trolley services. There were the ones that would pretty much operate, as I said, the bus routes are pretty much legacy lines from the trolley era. So you think about taking the bus and, a few hundred feet down the street, there's another bus stop because people in that neighborhood, and
sure.
And then there's things that were just completely incredible that you wouldn't think of today, but that existed. If you look on the turnpike when you're going down from Newark to Trenton and Philadelphia, if you look to the left at a certain point as you get south of New Brunswick, you'll see the power lines, the big power lines. Well, that traced a route there. There's somewhere near there, I forgot where it was exactly, but it picked up the route of there was an interurban trolley that went from Newark to Trenton. It was called, I think, the Trenton Fast Line. So it made just a few stops, but it was a trolley system.
Andrea, feel free to jump in here any point if you have any follow-up questions, and also to the rest of our listeners and viewers, if you're watching us on the live stream, I believe in the upper right corner there's a place you can click if you'd like to add your own questions or comments, and we'd love to include those in the conversation as well. And did you have something, Andrea, or no?
No, I just wanted to say that was very interesting. I didn't really think about buses being like the modern day trolley, and I guess that would solve the issue of parking, because parking is what ultimately killed the trolley, right? That we needed all this space to put automobiles, otherwise it wasn't as convenient if you couldn't park them. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of did and didn't. People didn't want the trolleys to go away. Industry wanted the trolleys to go away. The petroleum industry, the auto industry, certain people that were on the take in government and industry that were influencing people in Congress. It was a really backroom kind of thing in most cases, even on a local level, where people were basically trying to help the auto industry. It was intrinsically tied to the decentralization of our cities, to white flight, to racial discrimination. They sort of knew on some level that we call it, people that are transit advocates and enthusiasts call it the era of bustitution. When, trolley lines, electric rail lines were substituted with petroleum dependent buses. It was all tied up with that cycle of making the world petroleum dependent. And it happened everywhere, not just here, but here most dramatically. In the post-World War II period in Europe, they prioritized a more equal footing for modes. In the United States, they prioritized an entirely petroleum-dependent paradigm. Buses were part of that. They also knew that people were not going to take to buses as they did to trolleys because buses were less comfortable and the ride just wasn't the same.
Davey, what do you think it was about certain cities, so like New Orleans or San Francisco, that were able to maintain, I'm sure not all of the lines, but like some of their trolley systems? Why do you think it worked there?
A lot of that has to do with grassroots involvement of the community, but it's also the physical plant of the way the tracks were laid. And a lot of people talk about how the systems that had a significant portion of the routes in a private reservation, rather in the middle of the street, stood a better chance of being able to preserve something, if truncated, of what existed before. Because again, we're talking about 100 years ago, and cars did come on the scene, at a time where trolley use was at its apex. And people were somehow convinced at that time that they were doing something advanced. And everything has its place, I guess you could say, in the scheme of things, but people didn't understand the ways in which they were being manipulated into a century of unending lie-based wars to the profit of the petroleum industry. And they certainly didn't understand the way that they were going to be subsidizing their own demise, sending their children to fight in lie-based wars in the Middle East. They had no connection to the Middle East. They didn't know about the Middle East. They didn't know about the Ottoman Empire. They didn't know about Iran. They didn't know about Central Asia. All they knew is that they were going to be able to buy this status symbol, and it was going to somehow set them apart because Ford made the price so low, of the manufactured.
The automobile.
Automobile.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm afraid this is such a fascinating topic. We could talk about this so long, but we do have another segment we need to go to. Real briefly, so the trolley, I guess, went away in the 1950s. That was a 52, I believe.
Around that was the 29 trolley, and it went out to Caldwell ultimately, but it also used to do, it did two routes, I guess you could say. It ran up Bloomfield Avenue from the current alignment of the Newark subway, the Newark light rail. If you look, if you take the Newark light rail, if you look when you come into Bloomfield Avenue Station, I'm sorry, off to the side, on either side, there are ramps.
Right.
And they're overgrown. And one of them has a power transformer on it, and the other one has an elevator they built to bring people down from the street level through the
Right.
ramp. But the trolleys used to come off the main alignment.
Oh, wow.
And turn and go up Bloomfield Avenue all the way to Montclair Bell Street Car House, which was located right, if you look on Bloomfield Avenue in Montclair, there was a bowling alley there for many years. It was in a bowling alley. That was the trolley.
Oh, wow. You learn something new all the time. I've lived here so long, never knew that. That's what that was.
Yeah.
So,
and then then it would turn around and go back to or go to Caldwell. Yeah.
Wow, that's so fascinating. Well, thank you so much, Davey. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sorry we can't go on longer, but we do have to move on. But this was really has really been great. And thank you, Andrea, for your question. This is really
you, Andrea.
fascinating.
Andrea, you can start a citizen-led Bring Back the Trolley group.
You know, I was thinking about this has so many connections to modern consumerism, and we continue to make the same mistakes. And I love seeing how theoretically this connects and how still we allow a lot of oligopolies to take over our lives without realizing the consequences that might be down the road, even if they are a century removed. So
Yeah.
thank you for that fascinating look. I had no idea asking simply if the tracks were still there would be so deep, but thank
Right.
you.
Thank you
Yeah,
for inviting
yeah.
me. And I realize I can be a freak about this. I could go on for days and people get so tired and run away crying. And it's just,
It's such a fascinating
Oh,
topic.
kidding.
So thank you again so much. We really appreciate it. So thank you,
Thank
Davey
you.
and Andrea. Okay, goodbye. Okay, so we're going to move on to our next segment now, where we are going to talk about solar energy. Change my background there.
Oh, that
so,
one's tricky.
so we have, we're going to be joined by our resident expert, Krystal, who has a background in solar. So actually our question asker is Angelique, who's also a Montclair resident. Angelique, thank you so much for joining us. And what is your question? Oh, well, you got to unmute yourself. Sorry. There you go.
Hi.
Hi.
So excited to ask these questions because I've been wondering for years since, 1998 when we moved out from Manhattan and got a home in Montclair. I'm no longer in that home and I'm in a new home that looks to me like it might be a solar panel ready house. I think I get more sunlight. I'm just kind of confused about how to go about doing it. What are the financial benefits? Obviously, there's a lot of environmental benefits. So I'm hoping you might be able to help me. I see a lot of ads places and I'm like, are these legit? I don't know where to go, what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to give you some background, I'm a product designer by training. So I actually started a business where we make small solar panels that you can hang in your window. But since starting that, I just got deeper and deeper into solar. This is actually a residential. I don't need it. Scott, I don't need a virtual background. This is an IRL solar background. I actually hook up big solar panels to my apartment windows. So I'm like Davey in solar. I could talk about this for hours, but I think to answer your question, because solar is becoming so popular, and I think because so many people recognize the benefits, financial and environmental, there are a ton of solar advertisements. So there's people that knock on your door. I don't know if you've had people have you had people knock on your door?
Yeah, not recently, but I have.
So you might see Facebook ads, people knock on your door, emails, and if you like own a house in a solar state, it's very possible that you've gotten that. I think the first place to start is really to think about the overall benefits and steps. So one, if you own a house and you're the homeowner, you can actually go solar for $0 down because finance companies can help you make that down payment. The biggest factors are determining if your house gets enough sunlight. So there's actually programs online where you can input your zip code. It'll tell you if it's too shady or not. And that's sort of like the first check if you want to keep going. New Jersey is actually a fantastic state to go solar. There's a lot of great tax incentives that are available. I think there's one tier that expires the end of this year, and there's another tier that expires the end of next year, which also explains why a lot of solar companies are really aggressive, particularly right now, because they want to reach out to you. My advice whenever people want to go solar is to go with a local company. So I'm sure people have heard, have you heard of Sunrun and Tesla?
Yes.
So yeah, and I think there are a lot of great companies, even in Montclair, or in the Montclair area, that will do these estimates for you. And the trouble with as amazing as Elon Musk looks on the internet, I've heard a lot of customer service problems with Tesla and companies like Sunrun. They're like big box chains. So we can actually talk after this. I would recommend a couple local New Jersey installers to reach out to. That's where I would start. they're going to ask you things like your address. They might ask your credit score to determine what kind of financing you're eligible for. And then they'll design a special array just for you to look at and approve. The cost typically is between $10,000 and $20,000. But like I said, you won't have to put the money down, and you will actually save money on your bill every month.
What do you mean you don't have the 10 to 20,000 is the money you put down initially, or you?
Potentially not. I think depending on your situation, it's kind of similar to buying a house. Like if you can put down a down payment and then you pay less, or you literally can put nothing down and then your savings timeline will be a little different. But I think New Jersey specifically has been really aggressive because they want people to go solar. I think it's great.
Wow. So then once you've done that, then basically generally your electric bill is like nothing?
It depending on where you live, it might not be zero. It'll be less though. I think typically if your electric bill right now is over $100, they say that you could stand to save money going solar. You know, if your bill right now is like $20, then you might not save enough to make it worth it, but yeah.
What are they doing about making them more attractive?
That's a really good question. That's actually, I don't want this to become a commercial for my company, but part of what I focus on is trying to make them more attractive. I think the most popular style, this is like a solar fun fact, is actually called like black on black. So if you look at this solar panel that I have, they're black solar cells on a white background. So they really stand out. And the more popular style today is actually black with a black backsheet. So you won't actually see these lines. And from far away, they tend to blend in with darker rooftops.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the things that has, I don't know, made me hesitates lately. It's like, oh, it doesn't look as nice, you know, even though obviously benefits are good. I'm really excited about your smaller solar panels because I've been thinking, why aren't these like widely everywhere? You can attach them to like just about anything, it seems like.
Totally. I think it's getting there. And I actually think you touched upon you brought up a good point, that the attractiveness. And I think even for someone like me, like I have a background in design, and honestly, it's a little scary to get into such a technical field until you realize how great you can make them look. And that's what excited me about it. So I think the more designers and creative people and artists start to come into the field, the cooler the solutions will be.
I've got a question. I'm sorry. Well, I was going to ask how it works with, obviously, because the sun only shines during the day and you need power at nighttime as well. So you also need a lot of batteries to hold this power, right?
Yeah, so there's typically, you know, if you're looking to go solar on your rooftop, you have a couple options. So you can go solar and be tied to the grid, which is like the most popular option, where depending on the state, there's net metering laws. So you basically become like Angelique, if your house went solar and you produced enough solar energy that you weren't even using all of it, the amount of energy that you send back to the grid, you would actually get paid for. So you can be like a mini power plant. But like Scott said, if you want to be completely off the grid, meaning you're not connected, you're storing all your own power, you can install like big home batteries. So like Tesla makes like a home battery, and it's basically like a giant thing you would install in your garage where your solar panels harvest all that energy, they store it right in a battery in your garage, and then you run off of that battery.
So when everyone else's electricity goes down in the next storm,
you would be good. Yeah. And there's hybrid models too, where you can buy a battery that would just run just enough to maybe hold you over for like a day, you know, maybe not forever.
Okay, well, with that, we kind of need to wrap up here. But thank you so much, Angelique, because that was a really great question. I think something a lot of us are wondering about. I've looked into it myself in the past. Unfortunately, my house isn't facing the right direction and there's a tree nearby, and so they thought it wouldn't be an ideal candidate, but I would love to have solar on my roof as well. I think a lot of people are wondering about that. So thank you so much.
You can do ground mounted solar.
I don't have a big yard though, unfortunately. So it's, yeah, I wish it were more of an option, but I think more people should definitely be looking into it. It's really fascinating.
Yeah,
So
totally.
thank you so much. Okay, well, with that, I think we need to wrap up. As I said, we'll be doing Please Explain every day this week with a different topic and a different co-host. Krystal's actually going to be back on Thursday to join me again as co-host. So looking forward to that. And so stay tuned and we will be posting all of the topics and things we'll be discussing on our website. Tomorrow, we're going to look at the question of what happens to our recycling after we leave it at the curb. So that should be fascinating. So
Yeah.
thank you so much, Krystal. I really appreciate it. And any final words you want to say?
No, thank you. I learned a lot about trolleys. The next time I see a bus, I'm going to make that connection. So
right.
I'm happy, and I'll see everyone on Thursday. Tune back in.
Cool. Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate it.